A shocking revelation. Victor Sterling had built his entire existence around the principle of control. Every choice, every investment, every step meticulously planned had led him to unimaginable success. He was a master player, fully aware of the dynamics of influence, and maneuvering through them with unmatched skill. However, everything fell apart in an instant the moment he saw her. In the lobby of a luxury resort, he found himself holding the hand of a little girl with striking blue eyes. Standing before him was the last person he anticipated ever encountering again, his ex-wife, Eliza. The child she cradled was the perfect age. The resemblance was undeniable. A chilling realization took root in his heart. Had Eliza been keeping a secret from him all these years? Had he unknowingly walked past his own daughter, completely oblivious to her existence? Join this conversation. Comment below on whether Eliza should have told him sooner. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dive stories. Part 1. The Unraveling. Victor wasn't the type of person to dwell on the past. His entire existence revolved around progress, making decisions without a moment's pause, always aware of what lay ahead. He spent years mastering the art of control, building an empire through unyielding determination and discipline. To those watching, he seemed to possess everything: a thriving business worth millions, authority, influence, and the ability to walk into any space and command admiration. As he relaxed in the opulent lobby of the Azure Coast Resort, holding a glass of whiskey and allowing the soft murmur of chatter to envelop him, an unexpected feeling began to settle in: the strange burden of fatigue. He came under the pretense of seeking a rare respite, but deep down, he was acutely aware that his mind was already preoccupied with upcoming meetings, deals nearing completion, and phone calls awaiting his attention. He was not particularly skilled in the art of relaxation. He savored another sip, letting out a slow breath as his eyes drifted toward the entrance. It was at that moment that he saw her. Initially, he believed his imagination was deceiving him. The figure stepping out of the revolving door bore an uncanny resemblance to a phantom from his history, a person he had made sure he would never encounter again. She moved with an elegant serenity, her dark brown hair flowing over her shoulders as she cradled a small child in her arms. The sight stirred a deep tension within him. Eliza, for a brief instant, merely stared, struggling to comprehend the scene before him. She looked virtually unchanged from 3 years ago, still beautiful and serene. Yet there was now a subtle layer of fatigue etched into her features. Nothing could have prepared him for the shock of finding her here, in this unexpected setting, especially with the child she held in her arms. A small girl, perhaps only 3 years old, clung to Eliza's neck, her face nestled into her mother's shoulder. Victor felt his fingers tighten around the glass he held. His heartbeat, once steady and controlled, now accelerated with an inexplicable urgency. He hadn't seen Eliza since their union came to an end. Their divorce unfolded smoothly, devoid of theatrical court confrontations or unresolved disputes. She had left, and he had permitted her to go, convincing himself it was the correct decision. He immersed himself in his pursuits, believing that what they had once experienced was merely a fleeting distraction. He had moved on, or so he repeatedly assured himself. Yet seeing her now, accompanied by a child who appeared to be only a moment's distance from the snapshot in time when she had departed, an unnerving chill rooted itself in his stomach. Could she be his daughter? And if that were the case, why did he feel a sickening certainty that he already possessed the answer? Eliza approached the reception desk, adjusting the child in her arms as she spoke to the hotel staff. Victor barely noticed anything else in the room. The voices around him blended into insignificance, and the soft music drifting through the speakers became mere background noise. His attention was utterly consumed by the striking resemblance in the little girl's features. Even from afar, an intense sense of urgency seized him, an instinct he had never truly experienced before. He felt compelled to have a conversation with her. He sought clarity. However, just as he contemplated his next move, just as he struggled to muster the strength to rise, Eliza was already heading toward the elevator, cradling the child firmly as she vanished behind the descending doors. Victor remained motionless, his gaze fixed on the void left by her absence. The meticulously crafted existence he had established for himself had never seemed more precarious. Part 2. Unearthing the past, Victor barely rested that night. No matter how hard he tried to banish the vision of Eliza and the child from his thoughts, it persisted, insisting on his attention. He dedicated years to mastering the skill of compartmentalization, meticulously safeguarding his emotions, seeking logic and control. Yet tonight his thoughts were a tumultuous clash of questions, each one left unresolved. Did the child belong to her? It was as clear as day. The child's grip on her was unwavering, and the way Eliza enveloped her in a protective hug made it unmistakably clear. However, the real question, the one that persisted in his mind, was the one he doubted he was prepared to confront. Did she belong to him? A peculiar sense of panic washed over him, an unfamiliar sensation he had never before experienced. If Eliza had a child, his child, why had she concealed it from him? Did she genuinely think he was unworthy of knowing? Or perhaps had she assumed he wouldn't be affected at all? As the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the wide windows of his suite, Victor reached a resolution. He would not permit himself to lose another moment to uncertainty. He sought the truth, and he was determined to uncover it. After a quick shower and a change into one of his meticulously tailored suits, as he believed maintaining control was essential under any circumstance, he headed downstairs. He wasn't certain if Eliza remained at the hotel, but a deep instinct within him suggested she was still there. She certainly wouldn't have come to a place like this for just one night. As he entered the restaurant, he scanned the room with a keen eye. The resort was designed for the affluent, those who effortlessly indulged in mid-week getaways without hesitation. However, Victor had no intention of looking for them. His gaze settled on a quaint table by the terrace, where Eliza was seated with a young woman beside her. His heart sped up at the sight of them together in the sunlight. Eliza looked as stunning as ever, her dark brown hair pulled back in a relaxed ponytail, exuding a natural grace in her demeanor. The child, if memory served him right, was named Chloe, as the receptionist had mentioned the night before. She sat quietly. Her tiny legs swung beneath the table as she nibbled on a piece of toast. It was the first moment Victor truly observed her, and the sight prompted a knot of disquiet in his stomach. Her eyes were a striking blue, unmistakably his blue eyes, a truth that could no longer be overlooked. Taking a deep breath, he advanced, approaching their table with determination. Eliza sensed his presence before he uttered a word. Her body tensed instinctively. Her fingers grasped her coffee cup with renewed intensity. She cast a fleeting glance at Chloe before looking back at him. Her face was a mask of ambiguity. "We must have a conversation," Victor stated, maintaining a calm and measured tone. Clara paused, casting another glance at Chloe before finally agreeing with a nod. "Not here," she whispered. "Meet me outside in 15 minutes. Victor nodded slightly before turning and walking away, anxious to avoid any unnecessary drama. His pulse throbbed in his ears. Emotions coiled tightly just below the surface. Part 3. The inevitable conversation. 15 minutes later, He found himself beside the serene garden terrace at the resort's edge, his hands tucked into his pockets, gazing at the vast ocean. The tumultuous waves offered no comfort to the tempest brewing within him. Suddenly, he became aware of footsteps coming up behind him. He looked to see Eliza standing there, her arms crossed, her demeanor cautious. Victor inhaled deeply, seeking to regain his composure. "Does she belong to me?" Victor asked. Eliza flinched slightly, her gaze ignited with an enigmatic spark. She let out a sigh, glancing downward briefly before looking him in the eyes. "Indeed," she murmured softly. "She is yours." The ground felt unsteady beneath his feet. 3 years had passed. For 3 years, he remained unaware. From this moment on, everything in his life would irrevocably change. Victor remained immobile, his thoughts grappling with the profound impact of Eliza's words. Her words were spoken with such simplicity and calm. Yet the effect crashed over him like a powerful tidal wave. Chloe was his beloved daughter. His hands clenched in his pockets as he struggled to maintain a steady breath. A torrent of feelings surged through him: shock, anger, disbelief. But beneath it all lay a deeper, more primal essence. He had a child, a fact that had completely eluded him. Eliza shifted, her unease apparent as she braced herself for his response. Her arms remained crossed, a posture suggesting she was preparing for whatever might unfold next. "Why didn't you share this with me?" His voice was soft, but the sharpness was unmistakable. Eliza let out a quick breath. Her fingers brushed her forehead as she finally met his gaze. "This isn't how it was supposed to unfold, Victor. I never intended to keep her from you. However, the moment I discovered I was expecting, we were already falling apart. Your focus on work made you feel so far away. I wasn't sure how best to reach out to you." His jaw tightened. "You just took the decision for me. You assumed I wouldn't be affected." Her eyes flashed with a hint of irritation. "I assumed you might feel a sense of duty, that you would shy away from responsibility, not out of desire. I wanted to make sure Chloe never felt like a burden growing up." Victor let out a sarcastic laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "You believed hiding her was the wisest option?" Eliza affirmed with conviction. "I believed I was safeguarding her, safeguarding our interests. The difficulty of that choice was immense. Yet at the time, it seemed the only option available to me." Victor ran a hand over his face, seeking to stabilize his thoughts. He had built his entire existence on reason, on dominance, carefully crafting deliberate decisions. Yet this was an unforeseen circumstance he had never anticipated. "She's 3, he finally murmured, his voice softened. 3 years of her life vanished. Time forever lost." Eliza's face softened, and for the first time, a touch of regret flickered in her expression. "I'm aware," she confessed, "and I won't attempt to rationalize it. However, Victor, I never intended to separate you from her indefinitely." He directed a penetrating gaze at her. "Then what prevented you from reaching out?" Clara paused, letting out a slow breath. "I feared that if I acted, you would claim her as yours." The words rendered him speechless. He stared at her, attempting to grasp the meaning of her recent words. "I wouldn't have done that," he said, his voice strained. Eliza met his eyes. Her face was a canvas of unreadable emotions. "Wouldn't you?" Victor swallowed nervously. Truthfully, he found himself unsure of the actions he might have taken at that moment. He had been uncompromising in his journey, unyielding in his pursuit of achievement. Would he have fought for custody? Would he have attempted to manage the situation as he managed every other aspect of his life? Perhaps Eliza was right. Perhaps he wasn't the kind of person she could trust with something as delicate as a child. Yet, he had transformed into someone entirely different. "I want to see her," he finally said, his voice unwavering. I desire to understand my daughter better. Eliza studied his expression intently, contemplating the trustworthiness of his words. Then, gradually, she nodded her head in agreement. "All right," she responded softly. "However, we proceed according to Chloe's preferences. She doesn't know you, Victor. One can't simply enter her world and anticipate that everything will align perfectly in an instant." He nodded, understanding evident in his expression. He expressed that he didn't anticipate that. "However, I have no intention of leaving this time." Eliza watched him intently, and for the first time, he noticed a shift in her expression. The fortified barriers remained, yet a fissure had appeared, a thin crack in the midst of them. "Then we start gently," she commented. "Progress unfolds gradually." Victor nodded once more. His heart contracted with feelings he struggled to comprehend. For years, he had been convinced he was alone, that the only mark he would leave on the world was the empire he had built. For the first time, he realized his mistakes, and he was determined to do whatever was necessary to reclaim the time he had squandered. Part 4. The first encounter. Victor had always approached situations with confidence. He had orchestrated multi-million-dollar deals, faced off in boardrooms with the most formidable executives, and maneuvered through crises that would have shattered those of lesser resolve. As he stood beside the hotel garden terrace, anticipation washed over him while he awaited Eliza's arrival with Chloe. An unfamiliar sensation coiled tightly in his chest. How did one introduce himself to a daughter who was unaware of his existence? Eliza had emphasized that this would unfold gradually, following Chloe's pace. Victor understood that concept. He didn't anticipate her rushing into his embrace or addressing him as daddy immediately, but the significance of the moment still weighed heavily upon him. 3 years had already slipped away from him. He was determined not to squander another moment. The soft sound of approaching footsteps caused him to look back. Eliza approached him, her posture tense but firm, her deep eyes unreadable, and beside her, grasping her hand tightly, was Chloe. Victor's breath caught in his throat. She was diminutive, barely reaching Eliza's waist. Her dark curls gently danced with every step, and those blue eyes, mirroring his own every morning, sparkled with a serene curiosity. She clutched her mother's fingers tightly, uncertain in the unfamiliar circumstances surrounding her. Eliza knelt beside her. Her voice was a soft whisper. "Honey, this is Victor. He's someone I consider a friend." Victor experienced a sharp pang at hearing the word friend, but he remained composed. He understood the reason behind Eliza's words. Referring to him as her father directly might have felt too intense. Chloe looked at him, her head tilted slightly, as if she were examining an enigma that eluded her. She remained silent for a moment, simply staring at him with those remarkably large eyes. Victor lowered himself to her height. His movements were deliberate and gentle. "Hello, Chloe," he spoke softly. "It's a pleasure to meet you." Chloe shifted slightly, looking back at Eliza as if seeking reassurance. With a nod from her mother, she finally found her voice. "Hello." It was merely a single word, tiny and tentative, yet it caused a surge of tension within Victor. He offered a warm smile, aiming to calm her nerves. "I understand you have an affinity for puzzles. Is that truly correct?" Chloe's eyes brightened with a trace of curiosity. She nodded her head with a measured, deliberate gesture. "I'm not particularly good at them," Victor confessed, maintaining a cheerful tone. "Perhaps you could share your knowledge with me." "Sometime." Chloe stole another glance at Eliza, measuring her reaction to ensure everything was all right. After a brief pause, she nodded again. Victor exhaled slowly. He hadn't known it was within his reach. It might have been small, but it marked the beginning. Eliza stood upright, her fingers gently sweeping through Chloe's curls. "Why don't we take a seat?" she suggested, guiding them to a shaded spot where a small table and chairs awaited. Victor followed them. His thoughts were still spinning from the weight of everything. Before him stood his daughter. Her fingers toyed idly with the hem of her dress as she cast furtive, inquisitive glances his way. Eliza reached into her bag and produced a small coloring book along with a vibrant set of crayons, placing them before Chloe. "Feel free to add some color to your work while we chat, all right?" Chloe nodded, opening the book and thoughtfully selecting a blue crayon. Victor watched her intently for a moment before he decided to speak once more. "What color do you like best?" he asked. Chloe kept her gaze lowered. However, her response was soft. "Lavender?" He smiled. "That's an excellent selection. It's an audacious shade." Chloe stole another glance at him, holding his gaze for a beat longer before returning her attention to the page before her. Victor let out a breath, adjusting his position in the chair. He had anticipated awkwardness, but now that he actually sat with her, he understood the scope of the effort ahead of him. Eliza seemed to have an intuition about his thoughts, as she gently broke the silence. "She tends to be reserved when meeting new people." Victor nodded slightly. "That's perfectly fine. We will proceed according to her pace." Chloe immersed herself in her coloring, while Victor seized the opportunity to observe her closely. The delicate contours of her face, the way she chewed on her lip in concentration, and the gentle curl of her fingers around the crayon. It felt almost dreamlike to realize this small child belonged to him, that he had been absent for her first steps, her first words, and all those precious moments parents cherish. Yet he was determined not to let anything else slip away. After a time, Chloe paused in her coloring and looked up at him. "What color do you like best?" Victor smiled at the modest but significant moment. He expressed that he thinks he understands now. "Purple seems quite appealing." Chloe looked at him for a moment, then nodded as if she found his answer satisfactory. Eliza watched the exchange. A soft warmth spread across her features. Victor understood that this was only the start, but for the first time in years, he felt he was precisely where he belonged. Part 5. A bridge is built. Victor had never experienced time flowing with such a paradoxical rhythm, both slow and accelerated. The days following his initial encounter with Chloe unfolded like walking a tightrope. Every exchange meticulously measured, every instant imbued with a significance he had never foreseen. He had built his professional journey through assertiveness, through seizing opportunities, through ensuring events unfolded precisely as he envisioned them. However, this was not a transaction. This was his daughter, and no plan could compensate for the time that had slipped away. He and Eliza had established a cautious rhythm. Each morning he met them for breakfast at the hotel restaurant, positioned across from Chloe as she nibbled on her toast with meticulous tiny bites. She remained timid in his presence, unsure of his role in her life. Yet, she had begun to open up to him. Initially, it was the small gestures, stealing glances at him as he spoke, responding with a nod to his questions. She began sharing tiny parts of her day with him, mentioning the peculiar bird she had seen outside the hotel window, and her dislike of orange juice, which she found too sour. He clung to every word. One afternoon, as he and Eliza relaxed on a shaded patio, with Chloe absorbed in her small set of toys at their feet, he finally mustered the courage to ask the question that had been gnawing at him since the moment he discovered the truth. "What brings you here, Eliza?" She looked away from him initially. Her eyes remained fixed on Chloe, watching as her daughter meticulously arranged small plastic cups into a tower. After a moment, she expressed that they needed a break. "Life back home has been challenging." Victor watched her closely, recognizing the tension in her shoulders. He had been familiar with Eliza, to the extent that he could sense when she was concealing something. Challenging, how so? Eliza let out a soft sigh, finally directing her gaze toward him. Chloe has been asking about her father. She was curious to know if you existed, if you were even aware of her presence. Victor let out a breath, his gaze fixed on Chloe, who remained absorbed in her tower. The realization that she had dedicated her brief existence to pondering him, seeking answers that remained elusive, caused an unexpected ache in his chest. "So you brought her here," he murmured softly. Eliza subtly nodded. "I wasn't sure if our paths would cross, yet a part of me secretly hoped they would." Victor looked at her again. Her expression was a mystery that left him intrigued. "Would you ever have shared this with me?" Eliza swallowed hard. Her fingers grasped the armrest of her chair with growing intensity. "I'm not sure," she confessed. "I had the desire to. I came close on numerous occasions, but fear stopped me." Victor felt a conflict within himself. He was hesitant to hear her reasons, but he understood the need to do so. "What were you afraid of?" Her gaze settled on her hands. "That you would despise me, that you would hate her, or that you would try to take her away from me." Victor experienced a sudden wave of remorse. He had dedicated a significant portion of his life to the notion that control was synonymous with security, that power implied an absence of vulnerability. He had genuinely transformed into the kind of man Eliza had feared would use his power against her. "I never would have done that," he said. His voice was unwavering. Eliza met his eyes. Her deep eyes examined him. "I wish to believe that." For a long silence, neither of them uttered a word. Years of silence stretched endlessly between them. Countless thoughts remained unspoken. Then Chloe's tower collapsed with a soft crash, and she let out a faint sigh of disappointment. Victor leaned over, meticulously gathering the plastic cups and stacking them back into a neat pile. "Want to try again?" he asked. Chloe looked at him briefly before offering a subtle nod. She extended her delicate fingers, lightly brushing against his as she accepted the cup from his grasp. It was an ordinary moment, but for Victor, it held profound significance. Eliza watched them. A gentle warmth spread across her face. Perhaps her fears at the time were justified. Perhaps he wasn't entirely prepared. But now, at last, he was, and he refused to lose another moment. Part 6. An Unbreakable Bond. Victor had always struggled with patience. His entire existence revolved around quick decisions, bold actions that left no room for doubt. He was a person who established goals and realized them, who always ensured no time was squandered in silence. However, he was coming to comprehend that only through patience could he attain what was truly significant. Chloe was beginning to trust him, but it was developing gradually, cautiously at every turn. She still sought Eliza's reassurance whenever he spoke, still paused before responding to his questions. Yet, she was slowly allowing him into her world. She permitted him to sit beside her at breakfast, maintaining a respectful distance from her mother. She allowed him to help her select colors as she created in her drawing pad. She allowed him to hold the door open for her, exhaling confidence as she passed without a shred of hesitation. Although they were small, Victor cherished them as triumphs. One afternoon, he stood outside the hotel's garden patio, watching Chloe as she knelt beside a row of flowers. She lightly brushed her fingers against the petals, softly whispering to herself in a way that escaped his ears. Eliza sat on a nearby bench, maintaining a respectful distance as she watched Chloe, with the gentle vigilance of a protective figure, attentive to her every action. Victor approached with deliberate slowness, ensuring he didn't startle Chloe. "What are you doing?" he asked, maintaining a light-hearted tone. Chloe looked up at him briefly before returning her attention to the flowers. "Talking to the bees," she said with a simple tone. Victor raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what do they tell you?" Chloe pursed her lips, deep in thought. Although they are busy and tend to keep their conversations brief, I feel like they appreciate the flowers. Victor knelt beside her, watching the delicate bees dance among the blossoms. He had never paused to observe details like this before. His universe had been perpetually overwhelming, ceaselessly pressured. Yet, as he sat here with his daughter, the idea of slowing down felt less daunting. "Do you like flowers?" he asked. Chloe nodded slightly. "Mommy says they give people joy." Victor glanced over at Eliza, who was watching them with an air of feigned disinterest. He turned back to Chloe. "She's right. Indeed they do." Chloe pondered this for a moment, then pointed to a delicate, pale purple flower. "That's my favorite." Victor smiled. "I recall you mentioning your fondness for purple." Chloe looked at him, an astonished expression on her face, as if she hadn't anticipated him remembering such a tiny detail. She remained silent. However, a subtle shift flickered in her face, a softer hue that emerged. Victor allowed the moment to linger between them, without pressing or rushing. Finally, Chloe stood up, brushing down her dress with a delicate motion. "I'm very hungry," she declared. Eliza seized the moment to stand up. "I agree," she said, suggesting they head inside. "Lunch is just around the corner." Victor paused for a moment before he began to speak. "How about we share a meal together?" Eliza cast a quiet glance at Chloe, seeking her thoughts. Chloe tilted her head, pondering. Then she nodded. "Okay." It was a hesitant affirmation, lacking fervor. However, she wasn't rejecting the idea either. Victor saw it as a step forward. As they walked inside, a sense of calm washed over Victor for the first time since he discovered the truth. Perhaps he had transformed from a mere stranger to something more significant. Perhaps, just perhaps, he was beginning to evolve into something greater. Part 7. The Thread of Trust. Victor was beginning to comprehend that trust was not a commodity he could simply demand. It was a journey he needed to embark on, little by little, experience by experience. With Chloe, every small triumph held significance. In the days that followed, their exchanges became increasingly fluid. He still experienced his moments of silence. She still paused occasionally before addressing him. However, the hesitation in her gaze was diminishing. She stopped clutching Eliza when he was near. She closed the gap between them, no longer doubting his presence. One morning, he walked into the dining room to see Chloe already at their familiar table, a plate of pancakes awaiting her. Eliza poured a cup of coffee. Her demeanor reflected a newfound sense of tranquility that had eluded her for days. Victor pulled out his chair and sat down, watching Chloe as she meticulously drizzled syrup onto her pancakes. "Are they good?" he asked. Chloe looked at him. Her mind raced as she chewed. Then she slowly nodded. "They are okay." Victor had a knowing smile. "Just satisfactory." After a brief pause, she commented, "They would be better with strawberries." Victor nodded with a grave expression. "I shall keep that in mind for the future." Chloe observed him intently, as if measuring the sincerity of his words. She silently pushed her plate a fraction closer to him. "If you want, you can have some." Victor felt a tightness in his chest. It was a seemingly small act, yet from her, it held a meaning she likely didn't fully comprehend. He grasped his fork. He cut a delicate mouthful before savoring the taste. He commented that it wasn't bad, but I agree with you. Strawberries could enhance its quality. Chloe offered a subtle, contented smile before returning her attention to her breakfast. Eliza, who had watched the interaction in silence, directed a knowing glance at Victor. It marked the inaugural moment Chloe had chosen to share something with him, and both of them were keenly aware of it. After their morning meal, they chose to stroll along the shore. The resort's secluded beach was tranquil, with the waves gently lapping at the sand. Chloe ambled between them. Her small hand sometimes reached out to grasp Eliza's as they walked. Victor watched as she bent down to pick up a seashell, examining it closely in her hands before holding it up for a better view. "This is beautiful," she commented. Victor took it from her hands, examining it closely. "Indeed it is. Do you enjoy collecting shells?" Chloe nodded slightly. "Mommy says they are like little echoes of the sea." Victor returned the shell to her. "In that case, you would be wise to keep it." Chloe paused briefly. Then she deftly tucked it into the pocket of her dress. In a surprising twist, she reached out her hand and grasped his, leaving him utterly astonished. It was a delicate, fleeting connection. Her tiny fingers circled his for a brief instant, before she released her grip and dashed forward, her laughter echoing as the water danced around her feet. Victor remained immobile. A profound shift stirred within him. Eliza, seated beside him, offered a soft smile. "She's getting used to you," she whispered. Victor exhaled gently, his gaze fixed on Chloe as she gracefully spun by the shore. He confessed that he thought he was getting used to her too. For the first time in his life, the allure of business, power, and achievement faded, revealing that they weren't the most significant pursuits after all. Indeed, they weren't. Victor had dedicated his entire existence to the notion that success was quantified by figures, revenue, mergers, market shares. Those were the bedrock upon which he had built his universe. Yet, as he stood on the beach, watching Chloe collect seashells with an expression of pure joy, it dawned on him that perhaps he had been mistaken all along. The remainder of the afternoon unfolded in a manner that seemed almost dreamlike. As they strolled along the shore, Chloe intermittently darted ahead, eager to chase the waves, only to return moments later, excitedly showcasing another treasure she had unearthed from the sand. With every glance, her eyes reflected a growing trust, as if she was slowly starting to accept that he would remain by her side. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they had gathered a modest assortment of shells that Chloe meticulously arranged on a wooden platform beside the beach chairs. She sat cross-legged, carefully examining each item before categorizing them into distinct groups. Victor watched, captivated by her unyielding concentration on something so seemingly ordinary. Eliza sat beside him. A soft breeze tousled her dark hair as she shifted her gaze between the two of them. "I've never experienced this before," she murmured softly. Victor looked at her, his brow furrowed. "What?" Eliza paused, weighing her words with deliberation. "A paternal presence, a person who is committed and attentive. Someone who looks at her the same intensity that you possess." Victor hesitated, struggling to find the appropriate words to say at that moment. For years he had persuaded himself that family was an unnecessary burden, that love and connections were mere distractions that would impede his progress. Yet, looking at Chloe at that moment, a profound longing for all the moments that had slipped away struck him. He finally conceded, "The past is immutable. However, I can exist in this moment, if you allow me." Eliza looked at him. Her expression was a mystery that defied interpretation. "What happens when we leave here?" Victor let out a breath. His fingers combed through his hair. He had been contemplating that, too. Their stay at the resort seemed like an isolated haven, a fleeting respite from the everyday world. Yet, he hoped this wouldn't conclude when they vacated their hotel rooms. He expressed his desire for permanence. He wished to be a part of her life, not only for a short period of time, not only as a remote presence she barely acknowledges. He desired to assume the role of her father, to genuinely support her. Eliza watched him intently for a prolonged duration before she finally spoke. "It means the importance of being present, Victor, not only during the moments of tranquility, not only when it aligns with your schedule. She is not a transaction to be negotiated. She is a small child who seeks consistency, longing for the assurance that those around her will remain steadfast. Victor inclined his head. His jaw tightened. I'm aware of that. I am determined to show you that I am capable of meeting her needs. Eliza examined his expression, and in that moment, he witnessed the last vestiges of her uncertainty disappearing. Then show me, she murmured. Just as he was about to respond, Chloe approached, holding something tightly in her hands. She opened her delicate fingers, revealing a small white, perfectly formed seashell. This one has a unique meaning. Victor leaned in, carefully accepting the shell from her hand. It's stunning, he commented. What makes it unique? Chloe tilted her head, deep in thought. Since it is the last one I discovered today, it resembles a lucky shell. Victor smiled. A warmth spread through him as he absorbed the purity in her words. Then I believe we should keep it, he commented. As a reminder. Chloe enthusiastically nodded. Without a moment's pause, she sat down on his lap, her head resting gently against his chest. Victor felt a sudden tightness in his chest. It marked the inaugural moment she had approached him independently, unprompted, and without Eliza's comforting presence. The gesture was quiet, but it held immense significance. Eliza watched them, and when Victor's gaze met hers, he noticed a shift in her demeanor, something akin to acceptance. For the first time in his life, Victor Sterling felt he had truly discovered something valuable to cling to. This time, he was determined not to let it slip away. Part 8. The true meaning of family. Meaningful ending and CTA. The elegance of this conclusion resides in its subtle, yet deeply moving resolution. It's not about extravagant demonstrations or theatrical proclamations, but centers on something far more profound: commitment, trust, and the gradual restoration of connections. Victor Sterling begins this narrative as an individual who measures success through dominance and authority, convinced that emotional connections only act as impediments. He ultimately discovers that genuine success transcends the confines of the boardroom. It revolves around what he cultivates in his personal life. The most touching moment occurs when Chloe voluntarily sits on his lap, leaning into him as if she has finally found someone she can trust. That solitary action holds greater significance than any words that could be spoken. Eliza's role is also of significant importance. She transcends the role of a mere love interest. She embodies a fiercely dedicated mother, safeguarding her child's well-being. Her hesitation is not born of malice, but of a long history of doubt. She needed to understand that Victor was genuinely committed to remaining by her side, that he would not abandon her when challenges arose. When she finally urges him to, "Then show me," she is offering him the opportunity to become the father Chloe truly deserves. The sense of satisfaction in this ending arises from its deliberate pacing, avoiding a rushed move towards a flawless resolution. Victor doesn't resolve all problems in an instant, and the narrative doesn't conclude with an improbable fairy tale ending. Instead, it concludes with the assurance of something genuine: a father who finally embraces his responsibility, a mother who is beginning to regain trust, and a child who discovers that love can exist without conditions. This story unfolds around the theme of second chances, the pursuit of reclaiming lost moments, and the profound understanding that family transcends mere blood ties. It's about presence, commitment, and the decision to embrace love, even in difficult times. Ultimately, Victor discovers more than a daughter. He discovers something infinitely more precious, a meaning that no level of wealth or achievement could ever supersede. Questions for you. Which moment of the story did you feel marked a turning point in Victor's growth? Do you think Eliza made the right decision in concealing Chloe's existence? Or should she have told him the truth from the start? Join this conversation. Comment below your opinion on the characters' actions. Click like if this story moved you. Subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking stories.